It's bittersweet playing against Moon because me and him have like mutual respect for each other.
I'm a lot more excited to play against Team Liquid than any other team just because of our past. Dardoch motivated me a lot because we both came from the same spot. Both basically have a really good organization around us, and in the beginning of the split, he was playing really well and I wasn't.
Wow, 2 kills for Team Liquid, make that 3! 2 javelins for Dardoch!
I knew how good Moon was just from personal experience. Moon had a really rough split. He wasn't filling in the blanks that people had set out for him as a player.
He was performing better than me, so I definitely wanted to play more solo queue so I could be better than him and play better than him.
Elise has slide, and Moon is a superhero!
I'm definitely excited to play him in a best of 5.
It sucks playing against your friend early on in the tournament, but we'd have to meet them sometime.
It'll be a good matchup.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to day 2 of the North American LCS Spring Playoffs. We've got another exciting quarterfinal series today, and fans have packed the Battle Arena to see which of their favorite teams is headed to the semis. Earlier, fans outside focused their energy to pass on to the players, and Freak even sneaking into the crowd there. Team Liquid arrived earlier today to make sure they're ready to go for the match. They'll be going up against NRG eSports, who have been battling them for positioning all split long. They took to the stage a short time ago, and one of the matchups that we'll be looking at is that mid lane with GBM facing off against Phoenix. Thanks for watching, everybody. I'm James Dash Patterson, and joining me on the analyst desk this afternoon is special guest William Scara Lee, along with Sam Kobe Hartman-Kensler and Joshua Jat Leesman. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Than's like that's so kind.
So civil here without Freak.
I know, right? Yeah.
Good morning, Dash. It is close to the afternoon, but I don't mind.
Exactly. See, Freak would have gotten all up in my grill about that. Well, before we get into our pregame discussion, let's refresh ourselves on the playoff bracket. With their win yesterday, TSM earned themselves a trip to Las Vegas, and we'll be moving on to next week's semifinal, where they'll be playing against Immortals for a shot at moving on to the finals. Now, teams are also playing for those all-important championship points. Winners of this weekend's quarterfinals will earn a minimum of 30 points, and that amount only increases as teams advance in the bracket. Now, before we get into today's matchup, I want to talk a bit about yesterday's series where TSM upset third seed Cloud9 3-1. I mean, it was dominating victory post game 1, in which Cloud9 looked to be starting strong.
Clawed armor.
Yeah, that's the joke, but it looked like it did so much for TSM. You know, the morale of this team, they've been waiting all season long for big wins like this, and they got them against Cloud9.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy just watching the series unfold. It almost looked like Cloud9 fell apart a little bit as TSM got stronger throughout. Seemed like really good pick and ban strategy, but honestly, Bjergsen stepped up bigger in this series than he had the entire year, and a lot of that had to do because Svenskeren had his back for really the first time we'd seen all split.
Yep. I think that, the post-game interview by Bjerg just spoke volumes about what they did this week. All they did was he duoed with Svenskeren, and that's all they did. That's all they practiced was the jungle synergy, and honestly, he looked amazing this playoffs. And comparatively, especially to his normal season performance, this is where it seemed like the 2 weeks of practice helped out a lot.
And also comparatively, comparing him to Rush in that series, Rush had pretty much the opposite, where Rush was really falling apart, didn't really work well with either of the solo lanes. But TSM, that was definitely something that they needed, work on the communication between them, and it definitely showed. Another thing Bjerg said in that interview was that they were just going to commit to the calls, and everyone was going to follow up on the calls no matter what. And that can backfire, but it did not.
It can. We'll see what happens against Immortals when they face them, because that's a team that also seems to commit to all of their calls, and it very rarely backfires.
And if you commit to a bad call and everyone dies, that is definitely worse than just leaving one person behind.
Now, needless to say, though, both players were very vocal about the amount of effort and work that the team had put in, and it paid off in a 3-1 victory for TSM. Moving to the match at hand, a best-of-5 quarterfinal showdown between Liquid and NRG eSports. These two teams were neck and neck in the regular season, but Liquid was finally able to overtake NRG in Week 9 after being tied or behind in the first 8 weeks of the split. Now, thoughts on how Liquid was able to leapfrog at the end of the split, and will that carry over to today's matchup?
Yeah, I think Team Liquid, throughout most of the season, had a lot of very close losses and then lopsided wins. And their record at 10-8 doesn't kind of display how badly they were beating people when they're winning. And it obviously doesn't take into account their scrim record either, because it's not just Team Liquid who has been confident all split. It's been everyone else in the LCS who's like, no, Liquid is actually like the second or third best team.
Yeah, the other thing is that it is kind of weird to be like, oh, how did Liquid overtake NRG sort of at the end of the split? When Team Liquid, they've beaten, the top 3 teams, whereas NRG, well, not the top team. Mortals doesn't count the top 3 teams. The top 3 under Immortals, but NRG has not beaten any of those teams. Cloud9, CLG, Team Liquid has been able to take wins off of these top teams, whereas NRG has not been able to do that.
And it seems like their storylines are even reversed, because as Liquid progressed better and better toward the end of the split, NRG did too. The thing is, NRG was about to fall off. Like, it looked like they were going to lose every single game. And miraculously, in the last 2 weeks, Moon really, really stepped up. And he's been the kind of the player for me to watch, because before he had almost no impact in the first 8 weeks, but in the last 2 weeks, like, he just really took off. And has actually been able to synergize with his team enough to be able to make plays and make his team look good.
Yeah, that 5-1-13 performance on Elise in Week 8 against Team Liquid of all teams was one of the big moments in which Moon stepped up to kind of propel NRG into the postseason. I want to dive a little deeper into lane matchups themselves as we look at these two teams facing off. So let's just go down the list, starting the top lane, Lorlo versus Impact.
Well, I think it's cool that you just brought up, the last matchup that these two teams had, because a lot of people are going to point to that. NRG were able to get that win, and Impact was a big part of it. But this is because the whole team, NRG, targeted Lorlo straight from picks and bans from the very start of the game. They also planned out this elaborate level 1 double pull there, where Impact helped Moon get ahead in the jungle, and then Moon ganked for his lane, and they first blooded Lorlo. So there was so much focus put on Lorlo the last time these two teams met. But this time around, it's a new patch. There are plenty more tanks for Lorlo to play. And I think that he will be able to do just fine, because Impact has also have kind of a rocky end of the split. There was that game where in the lane swap, he kind of derped and stayed up there under the turret. Also, you used the teleport when Bard was there, and so gave up first blood and early teleport, which really snowballed against them. And there have been those moments for him this season.
I just think that everyone gives Impact like a lot of crap, because I think personally that Impact is still one of the best top laners in North America. But the problem with him is that he just looks bad because their jungle synergy just wasn't there. So Lorlo, I feel like looks like doesn't have to be a playmaker in his team, and Dardoch can make Lorlo look really, really good. I think Lorlo is a good player by himself, but he's not like a huge playmaker without Dardoch. However, Moon isn't the same way with Impact. Impact has to be the one making the plays. And it's really, really difficult if Moon isn't playing well.
Yeah, and it's so hard to divorce the top laner and the jungler from the discussion, because we say like, oh, Impact's still a really good player, but we're not going to see it if he doesn't have jungle support. And we have Lorlo up there who's great friends with Dardoch in and out of game, and they have very good synergy. So even if we could say like, oh man, in a straight up 1v1, Impact will get him down, the numbers wise, as soon as you reach team fights, like Lorlo seems like he might actually get an advantage here, depending on the type of jungle pressure Dardoch can have in that matchup.
Before we pull the junglers into the discussion, which we will do in just a moment, I do want to hit one last thing with Impact, which is that yesterday we saw Hauntzer come out on that Maokai, and as we mentioned, there are other tank options. I want to talk about the meta as it's developed in the top lane and how that might affect this matchup between Impact and Lorlo.
Exactly. That big champ pool that I was talking about, all the extra tanks that are coming in, Tank Echo, Maokai in the top, Nautilus is still up there, Gragas is now flex picked up there. So there are plenty of options, depending on how the bans fall. Poppy's still probably queen of the top lane up there, and will probably find herself on the ban list more often than being picked. But there are a lot of replacements now that either of those guys can choose from. And you talk about, in a straight up 1 versus 1, there probably won't be too many 1 versus 1 opportunities in this game. It's probably going to be a lot of lane swaps. And as I said, if you have one moment where you just have a brain fart or something for 10 seconds in a lane swap, it can have really, really big ramifications for the rest of the game.
And it's not just Impact who plays Maokai. Like, Lorlo played a whole bunch of Maokai back. Scar used to be on a team with Lorlo, and he said Maokai was one of his only 2 champions that he played back then. So he's always had a small champion pool, but Maokai totally fits into that one. So it's now Nautilus, Poppy, Maokai, and you're going to be
Don't forget the
hard-pressed.
echo, man. It's coming.
Yeah, but is it going to come for Lore, though? I think it might come for Impact because he's had a broader champion pool in history. But even just those 3 champions for Lore, it seems like it's going to be hard to starve him without leaving a lot open for Dardoch and Phoenix and Piglet.
Like, the thing is, it's like the 2 teams take really different stylistic approaches. So on one side, Dardoch is they're guaranteed. The TL has the tank top and the carry jungler, and on the other side, it's the same way, but. I think Impact is really wants to bust out something like Yasuo, because I think his Yasuo is like one of the best in North America, and he even says it's like a really good champion. And maybe there's a way to find like the middle ground. Like maybe that's why I look at Echo coming into this equation and being like, maybe that's the chance for NRG to be able to actually have Impact carry more while still being tanky. Like maybe he's the perfect balance because he can destroy backline by himself, and then he doesn't have to rely so much on Moon being able to, let's say, like carry. From the early game for him to get a lead before he can do anything with it.
Well, we talked a lot about the way that the top lane and the jungler can interact. Now let's focus in on the junglers individually, because they can also choose to go elsewhere or just fight each other themselves. So, you know, the story between these 2 junglers is that Moon has been relatively inconsistent, you know, probably more poor performances than great performances, whereas Dardoch's still a polarizing player. Sometimes he really goes off and sometimes he doesn't, but slightly, I mean, the stats show.
Yeah. Dardoch is incredibly aggressive, but his peaks are super high, and I don't think you'll find a person in the LCS who says that Moon is better than Dardoch as how he's performed. And we look at Moon, he's been very bad this split in a lot of different ways, kill participation-wise, and we say he plays carry junglers, so does Dardoch, but Moon hasn't carried with them. Whereas Dardoch has had significant game impact in almost every game we've seen him on a carry jungler. So this will be a matchup that if Moon can equalize is probably the only way I see NRG having a good chance in this series.
And one thing I want to bring up that isn't often discussed with these 2 guys is that Dardoch is also the shot caller and like playmaker for this team. As a jungler, it's so much easier for you to look good and make strong plays if you are the one directing the team, because all the plays are made around you. You know, you get to press when your lanes are strong. You get to choose to go to the strong lanes. But Moon gets pulled around on the team a lot. People ask for ganks. He gets directed, whereas Dardoch is the one, you know, more directing the show for where he's going in the early game.
And I think that NRG is definitely like a team where you.
I mean, they've got GBM and Impact on the team, right? Which are big voices.
Yeah. You have two people who are going to be big voices, and Moon's just going to be running around listening to them. But honestly, for me, Moon is the player to watch this game. If he's able to match his last 2 week performances and advance past it, kind of like what TSM did with their jungler, they have a good shot or a decent shot of winning. But afterwards, if they can't do that, it's going to be really hard for NRG to even win a game.
And it's an extra level more difficult. Like when this team was put together, we're thinking, okay, maybe stylistically they can match up, but we have Impact, who likes to be a shot caller. He doesn't speak English, so the communication has to travel through Quan, who doesn't seem like an assertive player. So like, not only is he torn between which lane he wants to gank, he's torn between languages. He's trying to listen to shot calls from someone whose language he doesn't speak, and if he wants to get on the same page, he has to go through a translator. Like, it's immensely difficult for Moon to have anywhere near the control Dardoch has, even just in comms.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about a player who is assertive and his counter opponent in the mid lane, GBM for NRG, a guy who will call Moon for ganks, who will tell the team what he needs against Phoenix, who's just been a very serviceable mid laner for Team Liquid this year.
Well, I feel like Phoenix is the guy who studies really hard at school. He does all his homework. He shows up at class every day. You know, this guy is getting great CS numbers. He's playing Corki and Azir, the top meta champions. He's going to be your AP source of DPS from the back line, and he's going to deliver for you. He's a role player there, where GBM's like the bad boy, new guy at school. He just walks in, mid-game team fight. Oh, steals Baron twice. Oh, I'm going to win the game here for the team, right? But he hasn't had the same CS numbers in the lane matchups. But really, also in Champion Select, like, the champion that GBM chooses tells you a whole bunch about what NRG want to do for that game, because they build a lot of team compositions around him, and he's got all these pocket picks. So you kind of have to wait till you see that to develop before you see what they're going to do in that game.
I mean, we talk all the time. I know that when Kobe and I broke down the last Team Liquid NRG game, one of the big things we had said would be in favor of NRG was GBM's pool in the mid lane and what they can then do, the kind of compositions that they can craft in Champion Select. Now, I guess the big question is, how many more of those picks do they have? Can they craft the Karma or the Zillion Poppy composition again?
And even though Phoenix does play the meta, it's not like he doesn't play other stuff too. He also has tied for the largest champion pool in mid laners amongst NALCS.
Yeah, tied with GBM.
Yeah, tied with GBM. And like stylistically, I was talking about this with Scar earlier, their so different. Highest CS per minute for Phoenix in pretty much any of the major leagues for mid laner, 9.7. And then there's an 8.0 CS per minute for GBM, but he has a massive game impact. So it's pretty much the lane CS guy and the I don't care about the lane, but I will try and impact the rest of the map guy. And when those two styles meet, you get some really interesting results, whether or not they pull towards each other or just fly even farther apart.
All right, finally, I want to take a look at the bot lanes between these two teams. So we're looking at both Piglet and Matt against Conquan and Altec. Scar, I'm going to start with you. What are your thoughts here in the bottom lane?
I want to see Vayne. That's what I think. I think there's a lot of teams who their AD carries aren't very confident. But Piglet, world champion winner, this guy is confident. I know.
Put on that SKT skin, ready to go.
I know he just wants to crush the other bot lane and be like, I'm the best. So I think they're a team that they've already shown they can run Vayne and Janna. And maybe that might look to be a priority here because a lot of teams have Sivir very high up on their priority. And I think TL is one of the few teams in NA that can actually run Vayne well.
All right, and Jat, you had mentioned, though, that with Conquan having to translate, but not really showing us through his gameplay that he's a super assertive player, do you think that he'll be able to step up in this moment against the other young shot caller in Matt?
It's going to be incredibly difficult for him, especially if he gets trapped in lane against them, because Piglet and Matt, as far as 2v2 laning, best in the LCS, and then you look at Altec and Conquan, worst in the LCS as far as 2v2 laning goes. So maybe if they get a lane swap, they'd have a chance, but then they had the communication barrier, right? So I definitely feel like this is a matchup that, again, heavily favors Team Liquid.
Kobe, ADCs, Altec, he came back in after that hiatus, looked a little bit better. I mean, we definitely said, okay, something has picked up here, but is it enough to go up against the likes of Piglet, who might pull out the Vayne?
Yeah, and like these guys have been saying, you have to look at the bottom lane as a bundle, both Conquan and Altec together, and you have to look past the stats, because Conquan actually has amazing warding stats.
Best in the
but
league.
something that doesn't show up in stats is presence in lane, as Aframu would say. And it's such a big thing about helping your AD carry lane. And in the early phases, the communication between these guys. We talked about, how Moon was going to be a person to look at in this game. I think Conquan is right up there with him, and how well he can work with Altec and the rest of the team.
A big thing is I feel like Conquan isn't the type of player to play a supportive style. Like, he's not the type of Janna or the Soraka player that you see Immortals use, like through Adrian. He has to be initiating with impact to be able to keep the team fight stable for their team to win. And so you're going to see him on champions like Braum, like Shen, like Trundle, rather than champions like Janna, which might be really, really hard for them to come back from, especially if they lose the lane against something like Vayne Janna.
All right, well, that's a lot of information and a lot of matchups to digest. You can do that at home. While we continue to break down a little bit more, we're going to go ahead and throw it over to Riv, who's Rift side with Liquid's GM.
Thank you very much, Dash. I am joined by Team Liquid's co-owner, Steve Aronset. Always a pleasure, Steve. Thank you for joining me. There's been words around the scene in the past 2 weeks, extended scrim blocks, trying to fit everything in that teams can. And what has Team Liquid's regimen been like these past few weeks?
We've been doing the same kind of scrim schedule that we've been doing in previous weeks. The guys are at an all-time high. Morale is good. Confidence is good. Scrim results are going well. I think we're just we're settling in, and we're going to beat NRG today. Yeah.
And coming into this split, fans are happy about it. Coming into this split, 3 rookie players, 3 new players coming up. It's been a very long road, but looking how everything went, how the team has synergized with the core members of Piglet and Phoenix now. What has that growth been like? What has the journey been like watching the team grow?
It's been awesome. The rookies on our team, if you compare them to other rookies on other teams, it's clear they're outperforming the other roles. I mean, if you compare Dardoch to Moon, right? Dardoch won the MVP rookie award for the split. So these guys are just core to the team, with the veteran players we have on top.
And that being a first for these guys in the LCS, looking at a playoff situation, it can even shake the confidence of the most veteran of players. Have you or the coaching staff done anything to kind of ensure or instill the confidence going into a best-of series in those new rookie players?
The confidence is instilled through experience and the scrim results and how much the players are learning on a day-to-day basis. So these guys are making improvements and strides that is developing their confidence going into this series.
Well, they've all 3 definitely made names for themselves. You've done a fantastic job this season, and best of luck in the series, Steve. We're now going to throw it back to the analyst desk to break down some more and get into the game.
Thank you very much, Riv. I actually want to turn to you, Skara, and get your opinion on the first best of 5 experience. You know, for a lot, as Riv just mentioned, for Liquid and NRG, some of these players, it's the first time they're going to compete at the LCS level in a playoff best of 5. What was your first experience like in terms of preparing for that and dealing with the kind of stress that goes with having to evolve your playstyle throughout a day of games?
I think I just underestimated the adaptation requirement in best of series, because when you play best of 1s the entire split, all of a sudden you're thrown into like a best of 3, best of 5 scenario. Like the ability to adapt game by game is super, super important. Like that's why for me, the most important game in a best of 5 is the second game, because whatever happens, like it's really hard for the other team to prep out completely the first game. Each team has had 2 weeks to prep, and they're gonna throw something new at each other. So how they can adapt after the first game really shows how good the coaching staff is on the enemy team and just how good a team is in general.
Yeah, I really like that point because it's not only how you adapt in the second game, but it's a nice balancing act between adapting after you've lost a game and not playing scared in the next game, because that can really affect a lot of new players as well. If you lose the first game, then you get kind of depressed, and it changes your play style in the second game, which can be detrimental.
Well, just another thing for us to track throughout this best of 5 today. We want you at home to participate in our analyst desk discussion with a repeat of our media question from yesterday. Which player will have the most impact today and why? Tweet your answers to @LOL eSports, and we'll read some of your responses later in the show. Now it's time to turn back to you, gentlemen, one last time to get your predictions for this series. So going down the line here, starting with you, Scar, NRG or Team Liquid?
Team Liquid 3-0.
All right. Short and sweet. I like it. Moving on.
I think it's going to be Team Liquid also, but I think that NRG will put up a fight and take a game.
Okay, so 3-1 for Kobe.
We had a really long discussion just now about every single role. It's hard for me to find the advantages for NRG at the time. But if they get more Baron steals and pull out the pocket picks, like maybe they get something. I think it's a Team Liquid 3-0, though.
Yeah. I mean, they've done it before. They're 1-1 in the best of 1s. But when you extend to a best of 5, that's when the real question arises. And we'll find the answers soon enough. It's time to head over to the caster desk to get this series underway. But as we go, let's hear from Matt and Piglet themselves on their synergy as Liquid's bot lane duo.
Playing with a world-class player, there's just a lot of expectations put on you. It can be pretty stressful because it's very unlikely that it's Piglet's fault for why we might mess up in lane or we might mess up in anything. And it's just all on me. And especially as like a rookie player, it's a pretty hard thing to get over.
신인 대 신인으로 하면은 좀 넷이 좀 더 편하겠지만 저는 그래도 3년 동안 하고 있고 그리고 좀 결승전들도 많이 올라가고 경험도 많아서 그래도 제가 최대한 라인전에서 리드하려고 노력하고 있어요.
Usually I'd be the person to like lead the laning phase. At first it was like kind of hard for me because I didn't have that sort of play style, but over time I learned how. I also learned just how to play with Piglet, who would always just know what to do.
매치업도 정말로 잘 알고 이 챔프는 어느 타이밍 때 약하고 이 챔프는 어느 타이밍 때 세고.
With Piglet, even though the climb's very steep, it's a very, very long climb I can get. So if I can like end up being on Piglet's level, I'll just be a world-class player. It's definitely hard, but it's what I need.
요즘에 좀 많이 호흡이 잘 맞는 것 같고 그래도 제일 잘하는 것 같아요, 저희 둘이.
They're the best in NA, for sure. I don't think they've ever lost lane to anyone. Even in the Immortals games where we're like getting smashed all across the map, they're still winning lane. Sometimes they just straight up win us the game based off laning, like against TSM.
Summoner heal, Yellow Star flashes, one more hit will do it, and that's first blood! And they're gonna get the dive too!
저를 제일 많이 리스펙트 해주는 것 같아요. 지금까지 해왔던 서포터들 중에. 그래서 제가 좀 편한 느낌은 많아요. 근데 맷은 자기가 플레이할 때 잘 모르겠지만 저는 그래도 맷 때문에 좀 플레이를 좀 쉽게 하고 있어서 그거는 맷한테 많이 고마워하고 있어요.